It's a nation on a knife edge. They shout out their anger and put their lives on the line and lose, as some of these Thais did in weekend clashes. But when it comes to arguably the most important issue in this troubled place, the silence is deafening.
I'm not ready to discuss this, because it's a private matter,
Tonight, the great untold story of Thailand.
The Achilles heel of monarchies is succession. It's the stuff of Shakespeare. You can never be assured how the children will turn out.
Reporting it has been off limits. But with a beloved king in decline, a successor in the wings, and Thailand at a dangerous and defining moment in its history, the time has come to enter the no-go zone and tell the story. Hello and welcome to Foreign Correspondent. I'm Mark Corcoran. What you're about to see is one of the most difficult reports we've ever set out to make. How do you tell the story of Thailand's royal family when any criticism of the Thai royals can bring a hefty jail sentence in that country? And that applies not only to those making the comments, but to any journalist or author, Thai or foreigner, who writes about the topic. But with Thailand at the crossroads, we've resolved that it's time for a detailed examination of the laws, the gag analysis of the royals, and their pivotal role in Thai politics. Eric Campbell has our story.
It has been a long goodbye. For months now, Thais have waited outside this hospital, praying their old king lives on.
มา6 โมงเช้าถึง 3 ทุ่มทุกวันฝนตกก็ต้องเฝ้าอย่างเงี้ยค่ะ
King Pumipon has been on the throne for 64 years. He's the world's longest-serving monarch and the only king most Thais have ever known. But at 82, in poor health, his reign is coming to an end.
คือจุดรวมหัวใจของประชาชนชาวไทยทุกคนไม่ได้ว่าจะคนเด็กที่ว่าพอรู้ความว่านี่คือในหลวงของเขาจนคนเฒ่าคนแก่หัวใจทุกดวงรวมอยู่ที่นี่ที่พระเจ้าแผ่นดินองค์นี้
Thais have come to revere their king as a living god. He is seen as the embodiment of Buddhist piety, moral virtue, and self-sacrifice. But the dread of his passing is mixed with dismay at his successor. This is almost certainly the next king of Thailand, Crown Prince Vajiralongkorn. The semi-naked woman is the future queen, his third wife, Princess Silasamy. The occasion, a birthday party for the prince's favourite poodle, Fufu. The scandalous video leaked to YouTube has been the talk of Thailand, but only behind closed doors.
We've seen pictures of his previous wives and girlfriends put out on the internet nude. They're pictures of them taken nude in the palace. How they leaked out was another issue. Some macho people, some Thai guys, might think it's cool. It shows that he's a king who has a harem and things like that. But for the most part, a prince must. And someone in the royal family must protect the institution of the monarchy. They must build it. They must keep its image strong. And this does nothing but make it a point of ridicule.
Journalist Paul Handley spent 15 years in Bangkok and wrote the only critical book about the royal family. He can no longer live or work in Thailand, but as an exile he can talk about what few here dare, the crisis of succession.
It's the elephant in the room and no one's seeing it or no one's talking about it, but it's there. Behind all the political fighting for the past 3-4 years is the issue of succession. Because succession is all about managing the country in the future, and no one's sure how it's going to happen, and everyone's concerned that the designated successor is not fit to stand as king.
The reason nobody's talking about it publicly is that it could land them in jail. Thailand is one of the few countries in the world that still has a law of lèse-majesté, making it a criminal offence to criticise the royal family. The penalty for lèse-majesté is 3 to 15 years in jail for each offence. Now, that's had a chilling effect on the media here. Thai and foreign journalists have avoided the issue, even though the role of the monarchy is so central to Thailand's future. Now, because of the risks involved, we're exploring this taboo without any involvement from the ABC Bureau in Bangkok or the full knowledge of any Thai national. The consequences may be severe, but we believe it's time this story was finally told. This is a dangerous time for Thailand. For more than a month, Bangkok has been rocked by mass protests from a group calling itself the Red Shirts. They're demanding the return of the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, who was ousted in a military coup 4 years ago. But the protests also challenged the power of the palace, because it wasn't just the military who wanted Thaksin gone.
The palace saw him using government money and putting it out into the countryside in his name as making him a rival to the throne.
Before Thaksin, the king was the only hero of the rural poor. This is the northeast region of Isan. Small farmers like May Do have always adorned their homes with portraits of the king.
นายหลวงนี่นะคะท่านน่ะโดนพายุหรือที่ไหนแล้งเนี่ยท่านจะไปทำเขื่อนไปทำอะไรให้น้ำตกไปทำน้ำให้คนยากคนจนได้ปลูกผักปลูกพืชผลและผักรากไม้แล้วก็ที่ไหนแห้งแล้งท่านก็ไปทำให้มีน้ำมีบ่อมีอะไรขุดบ่ออย่างเงี้ยแหละค่ะพอเสื้อแดงทำอะไรก็ผิด
But Maydu has also become a local organiser for the Red Shirts. In March, her entire village made the 6-hour drive to Bangkok to demand Thaksin be reinstated as Prime Minister.
ทักษิณเนี่ยนะคะเขาดีอะไรเขาเข้าถึงประชาชนค่ะอยากให้ทักษิณกลับมาค่ะประชาชนจะได้ร่มเย็นเป็นสุขเศรษฐกิจจะดีขึ้นกว่านี้ค่ะ
In Thaksin's 5 years in power, he showered the rural and urban poor with social handouts and development projects.
มาเลย
Your Royal Highnesses.
The telecoms billionaire also feathered his own nest with questionable state deals that increased his family wealth. That gave the military a pretext to unseat him.
The government and the people of Thailand.
Thaksin set up his own fault, but their real problem was he was trying to rival the palace, and he also was using his money to woo the crown prince and the children of the king onto his side. And basically, once you use your money for that, they owe you favors. And they saw him as trying to co-opt the throne.
The king approved the coup after the military seized power. Many argue he had no choice. Tanong Katong is managing editor of The Nation newspaper.
In the case of the 2006 military coup, the military took over the country, and the civilian government was in no position to counter the military. What's the king going to do? The country needed to move forward, so he had to endorse that, because the country couldn't be in a vacuum, you know.
The king has a long history of intervening in politics, most visibly in 1992 during bloody protests against a coup. In an extraordinary televised meeting, King Pumipon ordered the coup leader and the protest leader to prostrate themselves before him.
He had them kneel in front of them and he addressed them like feuding children, and he called them feuding children virtually. And he said, you guys have to stop this for the benefit of the people. Well, everyone liked that. But then if you look at his distinct words, he was very critical of the protest leader and did not specifically criticize the general. And then through the rest of that year, he defended the military. He did not defend anyone on the other side. The palace is happy to have the military enforcing things, making sure that who is in the Democrat government, who is the prime minister, is supported by the military and supported by the palace, and making sure that someone they don't like, Thaksin Shinawatra, is exiled out of the country.
The king does not ally himself to any particular groups. There is a big misunderstanding, particularly in Paul Hanley's book, that the king relied on the military support.
But anyone who questions this risks a long stretch in jail. Once a week, Kitachai comes to the Bangkok Women's Detention Centre. His sister, Da Torpedo, is serving an 18-year sentence here for criticising the monarchy.
ผมก็ไม่คิดว่าใช่ไหมจะออกมาลูกนี้ใช่ไหมแล้วไม่คิดว่าเขาจะตัดสินต้อง18 ปีเพราะการตัดสิน18 ปีอย่างที่น้องผมบอกว่าเหมือนกับการโทษเหมือนกับการคล้ายๆคนที่ไปฆ่าคนตาย
Da Torpedo's crime was suggesting the king damaged democracy by backing the coup. In her speeches, she seemed unstable, but the court sentenced her to 6 years' prison for each of 3 remarks.
เขาก็เคารพครับเพราะว่าเขาเติบโตมาจากประเทศในประเทศไทยใช่ไหมแล้วทุกคนก็ต้องเคารพหมดใช่ไหมแต่ผมก็ยังงงอยู่ว่าไอ้คดีอย่างนี้ของต่างประเทศมันจะไม่มี
So why does a civilized country jail a woman for 18 years for simply speaking her mind? That's a question that's long troubled Sulak Sivaraksa, a renowned writer and Buddhist scholar. He's a devoted constitutional monarchist, and as he points out, the king himself has criticised the lèse-majesté laws.
This law is harmful to the monarchy itself. The king said so himself. He said anybody bringing the chart of lèse-majesté is harming him personally and undermine the monarchy. This is from the horse's mouth.
And Sivaraksa has taken the king at his word. He's written a series of pamphlets offering what he believes is constructive criticism of the monarchy and the king's advisory body, the Privy Council. The king has never charged him with lèse-majesté, but police and politicians have.
This is the irony of this country. The police is a state within a state, and they all say they're loyal to the king, but they do entirely contrary to his wish, his speech. I wrote to them. I gave them the king's words. They just ignore it, unfortunately.
The fact is, it's become more dangerous to criticise the monarchy since the bloodless 2006 coup. The country is now deeply divided. There's the red shirts and a royalist group, the yellow shirts, who accuse Thaksin supporters of being closet Republicans. Both sides claim to be defenders of democracy. Both sides insist they support the king.
But how could you know that? If you have the law of lèse-majesté, those who don't love the king, they don't dare to open their mouth, would they? Even the red shirts, their hidden agenda is very clear against the monarchy. Have you interviewed any one of them? Have anyone said against the king? Of course not, because this law of lèse-majesté is so severe. It's awful. If you want to find out whether the people really love the king, let's abolish this law.
You can see the careful line the red shirts tread at their nightly rallies. From exile, Thaksin Shinawatra accuses the king's advisors of collaborating with the military. But he's careful to distinguish between the king and his advisors. Authorities have pursued anyone criticising the royal family directly, no matter how trivial the offence.
Truth is stranger than fiction.
Last year they made an example of Harry Nicolaides, an Australian teacher who satirised the prince in a passage of a book that sold just 7 copies.
This has to be a bad dream. This has to be a bad dream. It cannot possibly be real.
He was sentenced to 3 years, but received a royal pardon after 6 months in prison. He's now back in Melbourne and declined to discuss his treatment. The penalties sought for Thais have been even harsher.
Hey, what the?
Chiranuk Premchaiporn runs a political website called Prachatai, which encourages free-spirited debate. She's careful not to post any criticism of the king, but one entry was deemed by authorities to be a veiled criticism of the monarchy. As a result, she's now facing life in prison. So, Chu, this is the day the police raided your office?
Yes.
And how many police came?
At least 10.
10?
Yep.
That was quite frightening.
Very frightening.
Yeah, and they came to arrest you?
Yes, that's something that I never think will happen to me.
Now, if you're convicted of the offences, how many years do you face in jail?
Maximum is 50.
50 years?
Yeah, 50 years.
Half a century?
Yeah, I never think in that way.
You would die in prison?
Oh, maybe I can serve something in prison. But I hope not.
Yeah, but it's frightening.
Yep.
Yeah. Premchaiporn has been charged under a new law of computer crime, aimed at stopping the internet becoming a new forum for debate.
อันนี้เป็นวิธีหนึ่งที่จะทำให้เกิด self censorship เป็นเรื่องของการสร้างกลไกในการที่จะทำให้คนต้องหวาดกลัวแล้วก็กลายเป็นคนที่เหมือนกับทำให้ขนาดหรือว่าเรื่องราวที่เกี่ยวข้องกับราชวงศ์หรือว่าสถาบันพระมหากษัตริย์เนี่ย
It's reached a point where people don't even have to criticise the monarchy. They can be jailed for failing to demonstrate respect, as Chotasak Unsong found on a visit to the cinema. When the royal anthem was played, he declined to stand.
คือผมคิดว่าการยืนในเวลามีเพลงสรรเสริญเนี่ยก็เป็นพิธีกรรมทางการเมืองอย่างหนึ่งสำหรับคนที่มีความเชื่อทางการเมืองแบบหนึ่งซึ่งโดยจุดยืนทางการเมืองของผมเองหรือว่าแม้แต่ผมคิดว่าโรงหนังพื้นที่ของโรงหนังนี่มันเป็นพื้นที่ไม่ใช่พื้นที่ทางการเมืองนะครับแล้วก็เราก็น่าจะมีสิทธิ์ที่จะเลือกว่าจะยืนหรือไม่ยืน
A royalist in the cinema reported him to police. He's since been threatened with violence and has to move house constantly while he prepares for trial.
คือต่อจากคำถามที่เมื่อกี้ที่ถามว่าสิ่งที่ผมทำเนี่ยผมคิดว่าเป็นการผิดหรือเปล่าหรือดูถูกหรือเปล่านี่คือผมคิดว่าไม่ผิดแล้วแต่ว่าปัญหามันอยู่ที่ว่ามันมีคนกลุ่มหนึ่งที่รักในหลวงจริงจะมากจะน้อยเนี่ยผมจะไม่พูดว่ามากนะหรือผมจะไม่พูดว่าเป็นคนส่วนใหญ่แต่มีคนกลุ่มหนึ่งที่รักในหลวงจริงปัญหาก็คือสังคมไทยมันถูกปั่นจนไม่ต้องถึงกับดูถูกในหลวงอ่ะแค่ไม่ได้แสดงความรักหรืออะไรอย่างเงี้ยก็กลายเป็นความผิดแล้วอะไรเงี้ยในสายตาของคนเหล่านั้น
But the lèse majesté law has strong supporters, even in the media. Newspaper editor Tanong argues it doesn't impede free speech.
I think lèse majesté law in Thailand is not different from the normal libel law. But we have the lèse-majesté law because we have the monarchy institutions here. And as you know, the monarchy is one of the pillars of Thailand's democracy. We're maintaining constitutional monarchy here.
Have the laws ever inhibited what you report, what you publish?
I don't think so.
Not at all?
For the past 23 years, in my career, I have never been restricted, with any law at all.
เราทุกคนก็เหมือนก้อนดินแค่ก้อนหนึ่งเพราะบางไร้ค่าไร้ความหมาย
But the media have been strangely silent about the role of the Crown Prince. Every night at 8, every television network gives flattering reports of the royal family's daily tasks. With the king in hospital, family members like his daughter, Princess Sirindhorn, have been carrying on his good work. But the prince is almost never seen.
His son is nothing like him. His son doesn't have the record or interest of serving the people, of taking care of the poor people, effective or not, from his father. His son doesn't undertake all the duties. The king of Thailand, because he's such a cultural symbol, he has to undertake all these Buddhist rituals. He has to make appearances with the people, do all these things with officials. And the son does very little of that.
Like that other king-in-waiting, Prince Charles, the Crown Prince has grown old in the shadow of the monarch. Educated in Sydney at the King's School, then at the Royal Military College, Duntroon, the prince's only career has been in the military. Now, at 57, his main legacy is scandal.
Everyone in Thailand has heard the rumors, has heard the stories, and many of them true, about the son's misbehavior. To give an example, he's on his third wife, he's thrown out the first two, and even though he's married to the third one last year, he was seen running around Germany with a stewardess. This is not someone who actually is trying to protect the image of the monarchy.
The Crown Prince is not held in the same regard. I think any thinking person would concede that. Why is no criticism published of the Crown Prince?
I'm not sure about that. But yes, you can read that, in the blogs. I don't know.
But not in your newspaper?
Normally we don't report about that.
Why not?
I don't know. Maybe it's part of the tradition. Because we have lots of things to write.
But it is a fact. There is a video that shows the future queen naked in front of palace servants. That's something you haven't reported.
No, I'm not. I'm not ready to discuss this. Yeah, because it's a private matter. Yeah.
Doesn't it say a lot about the character of what could be the future monarch of this country? See, this goes to the heart of.
I won't say anything.
When you say you haven't been intimidated from reporting things, but it seems this is an example of something you have been intimidated from reporting.
Even personal matters, I never report about personal matters.
At 77, Sivaraksa is not about to change his ways. He's again facing charges that could see him jailed until the age of 100. But he insists dissent is a duty.
The monarchy is like the trees. You must preserve it. You must get rid of the wild ant, get rid of the bad branches, and try to, give manure and so on to keep it healthy. But you should not adore the tree. You should not worship the tree. You see, the tree is useful. That's likewise the monarchy is useful, provided it is constitutional, under the law, under the people's guidance, under morality, with moral courage.
The carefully crafted reputation of King Pumipon, protected by lèse-majesté, has strengthened the monarchy immeasurably. But the high standards he has set risk disaster for succession. Of his children, only Princess Sirindhorn commands similar respect, but she is 55 and childless.
Now, you have an alternative. Maybe they would jump the prince to his son, who's about 4 or 5 years old, have a regent, which maybe could be Princess Sirentorn. A lot of people are hoping for that. No, I doubt it. I think that's maybe 5% chance. It's the prince, and they have to reckon with it. And that's why no one wants to talk about it, because they don't know how to do that. The Achilles heel of monarchies is succession. In all history, in monarchies everywhere, it's the stuff of Shakespeare, it's the stuff of the Roman Empire. You can never be assured how the children will turn out.
All Thais wish their king a long life. But mortal reality is creeping closer to this idealised monarchy, as tensions grow between Thailand's old elite and its flawed democracy. It will take more than lèse-majesté to keep harmony in this troubled kingdom.
Eric Campbell and the draconian law that many believe is suffocating free speech in Thailand. And the terrible events over the weekend that cost so many lives brought that story forward in our schedule. We know there's plenty of interest in the report that we put on hold to make way for tonight's program. But we'll bring you our journey into the dysfunctional Greek economy next week on Foreign Correspondent. Looking forward to your company then. Until then, good night.